to Lit Matters. This video is going to look at Aristotelian terminology in Macbeth, and if you are writing an essay on Macbeth or have an exam coming up, how to use some kind of fancy words, kind of fancy ideas to make your writing, your analysis seem just that little bit more sophisticated. The terms we're principally going to cover are as follows: Protagonist, Hamartia, Hubris or hubristic, Anagnorisis and Catharsis. So, who was Aristotle? He was an ancient Greek philosopher and scientist. He is considered possibly the first literary critic, or the first sort of student of literature or drama and tragedy specifically. In his book The Poetics, he coins a number of phrases that have gone on to become sort of backbone of lots of modern literary theory, especially in terms of comedy and tragedy. He maps out, as he sees, what a perfect tragedy should look like, and it should have a tragic hero which has these characteristics and does certain things. The plot should involve certain key touchstones along the way for it to be considered a proper tragedy. And so his work is lost for many hundreds of years and then rediscovered in the Renaissance, and then Shakespeare and other writers try to recreate tragedy along these lines, following some of his rules. And he's considered the father of Western philosophy as a result. Here's a slide if you want more detail, and if you're pushing for a level 8 or level 9 in your GCSEs, or perhaps an A star in your A levels, then there's a slide for you. I'm not going to read it out. You can pause it. That's not because I don't understand all of it, I promise you. Right, on with the show. So the first concept you need to get your head around is the protagonist. This is very straightforward. It's not difficult. It's the main character. Okay, so instead of saying hero, you should be using the word protagonist. Proto, as in prototype, the first, and agonist, the first actor or the first character in the agony, in the drama. So, dictionary definition: the leading character or one of the major characters in a play, film, novel, etc. And of course, no prizes for guessing who that is in Macbeth. The clue's in the name. Here is how Macbeth's introduced. We hear about him before we see him. This is significant. Shakespeare's building up a sense of anticipation. He sort of builds a reputation for his protagonist before we actually see him, and his reputation is a fearsome, formidable one for brave Macbeth, with swinging his massive sword around, which a lovely touch is smoking with bloody execution. Presumably it's pretty cold on the medieval Scottish battlefield early in the morning, and he's been shoving it in and out of so many bodies, so to speak, that it is smoking with the temperature of normal body temperature, about 37 degrees, isn't it? So very, very hot. And then he carves out his passage through the battlefield, and then finishes people off with his special move, where he unseams them from the nave to the chaps. So he sticks a sword in the nave, the belly button, and then rips them open up to their chops, their chaps, the jaws, and lovely. You could analyze that verb unseamed, like a seam in your jumper, just to rip it open, and fixes his head upon the battlements. And that's a nice ironic twist, because that's of course such a foreshadowing. That's what happens to Macbeth at the very end. So that's the protagonist for you. Number 2 is Hamartia. Hamartia is a fatal flaw leading to the downfall of a tragic hero or heroine. So it's their Achilles heel. It's what drags them down. I think technically it should probably be something psychological. It should be a psychological mental defect or flaw, rather than like a bad leg that means they can't run, or sort of a physical disability. So for Macbeth, it's his ambition. And in his one soliloquy there in Act 1, he says all he's got is his ambition, which overleaps itself, and is thrusting him forward. So I think you should be referencing his Hamartia as ambition at some point in an essay or an exam response. Number 3, hubris, or the adjective hubristic. This is hubris is excessive pride, or sort of misplaced self-confidence, and the gods don't like it, and it's often almost always punished by the gods, and the protagonist displaying hubris or will get their comeuppance at the end. So for Macbeth, then I guess his hubris, you could perhaps track that down to, he goes to the wrong people for advice when he's in his moment of crisis, when he seeks salvation, and he seeks not salvation, he seeks guidance. And who does he put his faith in? The unholy trinity of the three witches, that rather than the holy trinity of Christian theology. He goes to the witches, and they tell him in their fairly cryptic ways that he doesn't need to worry about Macduff. He doesn't need to worry about anything as he understands it. Of course, he misinterprets what they say, and here, so he understands. Okay, well then, if I don't need to fear anyone of woman born, then live, Macduff. Why should I be scared of you? But then goes on to say, you know what, I'm going to make double sure. I'm going to murder you just because I can, and just to make certain. And so this is a quotation you could use to point to his hubris, his misplaced self-confidence, that he could take on anyone without any consequence. Right, fourth one, perhaps the least well known, I'd say, of these five, and so the most impressive, if you can refer to this in a response. Anagnorisis is a moment of a reversal in the plot, a sort of moment of realization where something suddenly becomes apparent to the character, and their fortunes are reversed. And so there's a couple of these that arguably. Firstly is perhaps when Birnam Wood does in fact start to come to high Dunsinane. Here's Malcolm saying, right, everyone in my army, okay, we're going to chop down a bit of the woods, carry a branch in front of you, so we're going to camouflage ourselves with the wood. And so as the forces start marching up the hill, it seems, as that helpful messenger points out, I was on my watch, I looked towards Birnam, and oh no, the wood began to move. And you can imagine what's going through Macbeth's head at that moment, as everything he has put his faith in starts to unravel. It's also a nice touch of superficiality. Once again, we've seen that the whole way through the play, and you can check out another couple of videos for where you see superficiality more specifically. But a nice Machiavellian touch from Malcolm there, and for Macbeth, a moment of anagnorisis. This is compounded by perhaps a second moment of anagnorisis, even more sort of final, in his meeting with Macduff at the end. Okay, and he says, "You better get away from me. I've got this charmed life, so no one who's been born of a woman, as he understands it, any man, can kill me." And unfortunately for him, Macduff's got news for him. Says, I'm afraid you better tell that angel, it's ironic reference there, that angel who still has served thee, tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped. So he, technically not born in the sort of literal sense. He was a C-section baby, little baby Macduff there, and so, oh dear, that's the last thing that Macbeth wanted to hear. And you can imagine Macduff kind of smiling a smug smile. That's not a direct Shakespearean quotation down the bottom there, just in case you reference that, but perhaps part of Macduff's inner monologue. Right, lastly, catharsis. So catharsis is the purification of emotions at the end. It's like when, not happy ending is too simplistic, but it's that sense of a wrong has been righted, and perhaps the baddie has been dealt with. And you get this in a lot of detective fiction. You get this in a lot of crime fiction or crime films today, when the detective or the hero has defeated the villain or vanquished them, and everyone can breathe easy in the audience. Everyone can breathe a nice sigh of relief. And of course, this is when Macduff finally deals with Macbeth at the end, and perhaps you could, if you're looking for a quotation, you could sum it up with Malcolm's almost an epitaph for Macbeth, his lines at the end there, that this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. The quotation can be analysed as follows: that he's all majesty has been stripped of him. He is just a butcher now, just someone that chops up meat, and that's how he will be remembered. No glory, no honor, nothing like the brave Macbeth, noble Macbeth, worthy Macbeth of Act 1. Now he's just a dead butcher. And his queen, Lady Macbeth, again, no glory, no honor. She's just like a fiend, associated with the forces of darkness, the demon, and so on. So that's number 5. I think you should try and use these terms where you can work them in. They show quite a good subject terminology, and perhaps you can maybe enhance your context marks if you're aware of Aristotle's terminology and how to use it appropriately in Macbeth. Okay, if you've enjoyed this, stick a note in the comments or subscribe it or like it, and I can do more of them.
Pressure.